The wind, a mournful song across the chaparral, carries the scent of dust and something else, something metallic and wrong. Nasha, Apache scout, dismounts from his paint pony, the animal's ears swiveling, nostrils flared. He moves with the silence of a shadow, eyes scanning the broken land, the sun a brutal hammer in the sky. Ahead, a plume of smoke, thin and grey, curlicues against the azure. It's not the smoke of a cooking fire, it's the smoke of desolation. He finds the wreckage of a wagon, splintered wood and scattered belongings baking under the relentless Arizona sun. Flies buzz, a low, persistent drone. There are bodies, settlers by their dress, still and pale. He has seen such sights before, the bitter fruit of conflict. But then, a sound. A thin, reedy cry, almost lost in the vastness. It pulls him forward, past the tableau of violence, to a small bundle wedged beneath an overturned crate, a baby. Its face is flushed, tear-streaked, eyes squeezed shut against the harsh light. A white baby, by all appearances. He reaches, his calloused hand surprisingly gentle, and lifts the child. It's then he sees it, on the infant's tiny shoulder, a mark unlike any he's seen on a white child. A small, intricate design, the shape of a soaring hawk, rendered in a faint, bluish hue against the pale skin. A birthmark. A tribal birthmark. His tribe's mark. His breath catches. This changes everything. This changes him. Nasha stands frozen, the wailing infant in his arms, the silence of the dead pressing in. The hawk, a symbol of keen sight, of messages from the spirit world, a marking of certain lineages within his own Chiricahua people. How? He looks from the pale Anglo faces of the dead settlers to the distinctively Apache mark on the child. There's more to this child than meets the eye. Before their true worth or secret comes to light, tell us, have you ever misjudged someone only to be surprised? And if you love a story of hidden depths, hit like and subscribe. With a guttural sound, a mixture of confusion and a nascent, fierce protectiveness, Nasha secures the child against his chest. His path, once clear as a desert trail, is now obscured by a dust storm of questions. He had been tracking renegades, a task for the army that paid in coin and grudging respect, a compromise in a changing world. Now this. He turns his back on the ravaged wagon, on the silent testament to brutality, and with the hawk-marked baby held close, he begins to walk towards the distant hazy mountains, his life, and the child's, irrevocably altered by a whisper of a cry and a mark of ancient heritage. The sun beat down with an oppressive fervor as Nasha made his way from the scene of the massacre. The child, wrapped in a piece of salvaged linen, had cried itself to sleep against his chest, its small weight a peculiar burden, both physical and spiritual. Nasha was a man accustomed to solitude, his world defined by the subtle languages of the wilderness, the track of a deer, the call of a nighthawk, the shifting patterns of the wind. He moved between the worlds of the Apache and the white man, a scout for the U.S. Army, a role that brought him gold coin but also the quiet disdain of some of his own people and the ever-present suspicion of the soldiers he served. His loyalty was to survival, to the pragmatic path that kept him fed and free, or as free as an Apache could be in these shrinking lands. The baby was an anomaly he couldn't pass, white, yet bearing the hawk totem, a mark of a specific, respected clan among the Chiricahua's mother's clan. He remembered the stories from his childhood, of such marks appearing on those destined for significance, for bridging worlds, or for great sorrow. His grandmother, a woman whose eyes held the wisdom of 1,000 moons, had borne a similar, though faded, mark of the turtle. He'd never seen the hawk on anyone but elders, keepers of law. His pony, Sky, a seasoned paint with a calm demeanor, accepted the new, small passenger without fuss, though its ears flicked back occasionally as if to question the soft mewling sounds. Nasha had little experience with infants. He'd seen them in the camps of his youth, small, swaddled bundles cared for by mothers and grandmothers. He was a warrior, a hunter, a scout, not a nursemaid. Yet, as he rode, he found himself adjusting the makeshift sling, shielding the baby's face from the sun with his own body, his movements uncharacteristically tender. The landscape offered no comfort, only stark beauty and inherent dangers. Towering saguaros stood like silent sentinels, their arms raised to a pitiless sky. Gila monsters, sluggish in the heat, blended with the ochre rocks. The distant mountains, his eventual destination, shimmered purple in the heat haze. He needed to find water, and soon. The baby would need it, and he had little. The attackers, whoever they were, renegade Apache, vengeful Comancheros, or even white outlaws masquerading, had taken everything of value, including waterskins. He saw their tracks, multiple horses, unshod mostly, heading south. Not his current quarry. This was something else, something messier. As evening approached, painting the sky in hues of orange and violet, Nasha found a small seep spring hidden within a rocky outcrop, barely enough to fill his canteen after letting the silt settle. He dipped a corner of the linen into the precious water and gently moistened the baby's lips. The infant stirred, its small mouth working instinctively. A pang, sharp and unexpected, went through Nasha. This tiny creature, utterly dependent, had somehow burrowed its way past the calloused layers of his heart. He made a small, smokeless fire using dry mesquite, more for the illusion of comfort than warmth, as the desert air cooled. He had some jerky and parched corn, but nothing suitable for an infant. He chewed a piece of jerky until it was soft and pulpy, then, with a hesitant finger, offered a minuscule amount to the baby. It gummed at it, a frown creasing its brow, before its instincts took over and it began to suck weakly. It wasn't ideal, but it was something. Later, under a canopy of stars so bright they seemed to drip light, Nasha sat with his back against a rock, the baby cradled in his lap. The silence of the desert was profound, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the baby's soft breaths. He studied the birthmark again in the moonlight. It was undeniably the hawk of his ancestors. What did it mean? Was this child a sign, a burden, a key? He had been on a path of grim duty, a path of solitary survival. Now, a new path, uncharted and perilous, stretched before him, its beginning marked by this helpless child. The weight of it settled upon him, heavier than any pack he'd ever carried. He felt the scornful glances he'd receive in a white settlement if he showed up with a white baby, claiming it. He felt the confusion and suspicion from his own people, seeing him with a child of their enemy, despite the mark. The land itself, unforgiving and vast, seemed to watch him, judging his next move. The baby stirred, a small hand uncurling, its tiny fingers brushing against his skin. A connection, as fragile and tenacious as a desert flower. Nasha sighed, a sound that was more weariness than despair. He had to keep it alive. He had to understand. His old life, the one of clear lines and solitary purpose, was already a fading track behind him. The next day brought the pressing need for a decision. He couldn't wander the desert indefinitely with an infant. The child needed proper nourishment, shelter, safety, things Nasha, in his current life, was ill-equipped to provide long-term. His first instinct was to find a settlement, perhaps a mission, and leave the child there. It was white, after all. They would care for it. But the birthmark stayed his hand, a silent, powerful claim. To hand this child over to strangers who would not understand its significance felt like a betrayal, though of what or whom he wasn't sure. He remembered a small, hidden Apache encampment, a place where a few families, disillusioned with the reservations and unwilling to join the renegades, tried to live according to the old ways. It was led by an old woman named Iline, a distant relative, a woman of great wisdom and knowledge of the ancient traditions. If anyone could shed light on the birthmark and the child's destiny, it was she. But reaching her meant a dangerous journey, days across harsh terrain, evading patrols and potential hostiles, and there was no guarantee Iline would welcome him or the child. He was, to many, a man who walked the white man's path. As if sensing his turmoil, the baby began to fret, its cries thin and weak. Nasha's resolve hardened. He would take the child to Iline. It felt like the only path that honored the mystery of its existence. He fashioned a more secure carrier for the infant, using strips of leather from his saddlebags and the salvaged linen, creating a pouch he could strap to his chest, keeping the baby close and freeing his hands. He found a few wild gourds and, using his knife, carefully scraped the insides to make crude containers for water. He also managed to snare a rabbit, roasting it and mashing some of the tender meat with water, creating a thin gruel that the baby, surprisingly, accepted more readily than the softened jerky. The journey was arduous. Each sunrise brought new challenges. Once, a rattlesnake coiled near where he'd laid the baby while he scouted ahead. His arrow was swift, his heart pounding not for his own safety, but for the child's. Another time, he spotted a dust cloud in the distance, riders. He quickly sought cover in a narrow arroyo, Sky standing statue, still, Nasha's hand on its muzzle, the baby miraculously silent as a troop of cavalry passed, their blue uniforms stark against the brown earth. He felt a bead of sweat trickle down his spine. If they had found him, a lone Apache with a white baby, explanations would have been difficult, likely impossible. The thought of the child being torn from him sent a cold dread through him, a feeling far removed from his usual detached pragmatism. During the quiet nights, as he tended to the baby's needs, he found himself talking to it, soft murmurs in Apache, stories his grandmother had told him, descriptions of the land, the names of the stars. The child, of course, didn't understand the words, but the sound of his voice seemed to soothe it. He learned to interpret its cries, one for hunger, another for discomfort, another that just seemed to be a lonely protest against the vast, indifferent world. He became adept at changing its makeshift diapers of soft, dried grasses and moss, his large, rough hands surprisingly deft. He was a scout, a warrior, and now, a mother hen. The irony wasn't lost on him, but there was no room for amusement, only a growing sense of responsibility that was fast becoming something akin to affection. One afternoon, while resting in the shade of a palo verde tree, the baby gurgled, a small, happy sound, its eyes, the blue of a desert sky after a rainstorm, fixed on his face. A tiny hand reached out, batting at the fringe on his buckskin shirt. Nasha felt a warmth spread through his chest, an unfamiliar sensation that eased some of the tension that had been his constant companion. He touched the baby's cheek with a single finger, marveling at the softness of its skin, the fierce grip of its tiny fist when it latched onto his finger. This child, marked by his people, dependent on his care, was weaving itself into the fabric of his being. The path ahead was still uncertain, fraught with danger, but he was no longer walking it alone. His purpose, once tied to coin and survival, was now inextricably linked to this small, hawk-marked life. The external threat of the harsh land and suspicious eyes was ever present, but a new internal conflict arose, the fear of failing this child, of not being enough. The landscape began to change, the flat desert giving way to rolling hills dotted with juniper and pinon pine. Nasha knew he was getting closer to Iline's hidden valley. His senses sharpened, not just for danger, but for any sign of her people. He moved with even greater caution, aware that they would be wary of strangers, even one who was Apache. He found a faint game trail that he suspected was used by more than just animals and followed it upwards, the air growing cooler, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. Finally, nestled in a small, well-watered canyon, hidden from casual view, he saw the wisp of smoke from a cooking fire. A few wickups, constructed from bent branches and hides, blended almost perfectly with the surroundings. This was it. He dismounted, Sky nudging his shoulder as if in encouragement. With the baby secure on his chest, he walked slowly into the clearing, his hands open and visible. An older man, his face a roadmap of wrinkles and wisdom, stepped out from behind a wickiup, a long-barreled rifle held loosely in his hands. His eyes, dark and piercing, assessed Nasha. "You walk far, brother," the man said, his voice raspy. "I seek Iline," Nasha replied, his voice calm. "I bring news and a question." The man's gaze dropped to the bundle on Nasha's chest. His eyes narrowed slightly. "A child?" Before Nasha could elaborate, a woman emerged from the largest wickiup. She was ancient, her back bent with age, but her eyes were bright and alert, missing nothing. Iline. She wore a simple buckskin dress, adorned with intricate beadwork that Nasha recognized as designs from generations past. She looked at Nasha, then at the baby, and a strange expression, a flicker of something unreadable, crossed her face. "Nasha, son of my cousin's daughter," she said, her voice surprisingly strong. "It has been many seasons. What brings you to our hidden place, carrying such a burden?" Her eyes fixed on the sliver of pale skin visible. Nasha met her gaze directly. This child was orphaned, left for dead after an attack on a wagon. But it is not the child's fairness that brings me here, wise one. He carefully adjusted the linen, revealing the baby's shoulder and the distinct bluish hawk birthmark. A hush fell over the small encampment. The old man who had first greeted him gasped softly. Iline's eyes widened, and she took a step closer, her gaze locked on the mark. She reached out a gnarled, trembling hand and gently touched the baby's skin, her finger tracing the outline of the hawk. "The messenger's mark," she whispered, her voice filled with awe and a hint of fear, "as it was foretold by the grandmothers of my grandmothers. A child of two bloods, yet marked as one of our own, destined to come in a time of great change." She looked up at Nasha, her eyes boring into his. "You were right to bring this child here, Nasha. Its path begins now, and it seems yours is now tied to it." The revelation hung in the air, thick with unspoken implications. The other members of the small band, drawn by the intensity of the moment, gathered silently, their faces a mixture of astonishment and apprehension. A child of prophecy. Nasha felt a shiver run down his spine. He had sought answers, and now he had one, but it was far larger, far more significant than he could have imagined. He had thought the birthmark was merely a curious link to his heritage. Now, it seemed, it was a brand of destiny, for the child and, by extension, for him. Iline beckoned him into her wickiup. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of herbs and wood smoke. She indicated a pile of soft furs for him to sit on. The baby, sensing the change in atmosphere or perhaps just weary from the journey, began to fuss. Iline watched as Nasha expertly soothed it, rocking it gently, his large hands surprisingly tender. A flicker of something like approval crossed her ancient face. "The old stories speak of such a child." Iline began, her voice a low murmur, like water flowing over stones. "Born of the Sun People, yet carrying the spirit of the hawk, a messenger between worlds. It was said this child would appear when our people were scattered and our ways were threatened, a sign that the Great Spirit had not forgotten us, but also a harbinger of difficult choices." She paused, her gaze distant. "The mark signifies a soul that has lived among us before, returning in a different skin, to teach or to learn, or perhaps both." "What must be done?" Nasha asked, the weight of her words settling upon him. He was a scout, a pragmatic man. Prophecies and destinies were the realm of shamans and old women. Yet, the evidence was there, on the child's skin, in Iline's certainty. "The child must be protected," Iline stated, her voice firm. "There will be those, even among our own, who will fear it, who will see it as an ill omen or a dilution of our blood. And the white eyes, if they knew its significance to us, some might seek to use it, others to destroy it." She looked at Nasha pointedly. "You have brought it this far. You have cared for it when you could have left it to its fate. The spirits have chosen you as its guardian, Nasha." A guardian. The word echoed in his mind. It was a role far removed from that of a scout for the army. It meant commitment, sacrifice. It meant choosing a side, not in the wars between Apache and White, but in a deeper, more spiritual conflict. His path, which he had thought was merely diverted, now seemed to be entirely rerouted. I don't know if I am fit for such a task, wise one," Nasha confessed, a rare admission of uncertainty. "I live a hard life, between worlds, trusted by neither." "Perhaps that is why you were chosen, Iline," said softly. "You understand both, even if you belong to neither. The hawk flies high, seeing all below. This child will need such vision in its protector." She then spoke of practical matters. The baby needed a name, a proper Apache name to acknowledge the spirit within. It needed a place within their small community, if they were to shelter it. This would not be without risk. Their hidden encampment relied on secrecy. A white child, even one with an Apache spirit mark, was a complication. Over the next few days, Nasha found himself integrating into the quiet rhythm of the camp, albeit as an outsider still. He helped with hunting, his skills as a scout proving useful. He watched as the women of the camp, initially wary, began to observe the baby with a mixture of curiosity and reverence, especially after Iline shared the story of the messenger's mark. A young woman named Teaser, whose own child was a toddler, showed Nasha how to prepare a thin gruel from ground nuts and berries that the baby accepted eagerly. She also fashioned softer, more practical swaddling from rabbit skins. The child, under Iline's guidance, was given a name, Shilan, no te, meaning little hawk brother, though they often called him Shilan. The name felt right, acknowledging both his spirit mark and his vulnerability. Nasha found himself using it, the Apache syllables feeling natural on his tongue when he spoke to the infant. However, the peace was fragile. One evening, two hunters from the band, younger men named Kale and Ranon, approached Nasha. Kale was openly skeptical. "This child," he said, gesturing towards Shilan, who was asleep in Nasha's arms, "it has the skin of our enemies. The mark. It could be a trick of the spirits, a test to mislead us." Ranon, quieter but clearly influenced by Kale, nodded. "Bringing it here brings danger. If the soldiers find this place because of it." "The soldiers will not find this place because of him," Nasha stated, his voice low and firm, his gaze steady. "I will see to that. And Ili, Ne has spoken. The mark is true." "Ili, Ne is old," Kale retorted. "Her eyes see things that are not always there. Some of us think you should take the child away, leave it with its own kind." The unspoken threat was clear. If Nasha didn't, they might take matters into their own hands. This was the internal dissent Iline had warned of. Nasha stood, Shilan held securely. "This child stays. He is under my protection and under the wisdom of Iline. If you have an issue with that, you have an issue with me." His hand rested near the knife at his belt. He was not a man who sought conflict, but he would not back down when it came to Shilan. Kale and Ranon exchanged uneasy glances. They knew Nasha's reputation as a formidable fighter, even if he now walked a more complicated path. They backed off, muttering, but the tension remained. Nasha knew this was only the first challenge. The pressure was mounting. He was no longer just a temporary caretaker. He was Shilan's declared protector, and that declaration had drawn a line in the sand, both within this small community and against the wider world. He needed to make a more permanent plan, not just for Shilan's immediate safety, but for his future. The relative peace of Iline's hidden valley was a sanctuary, but it felt increasingly like a temporary one. The world outside, with its prejudices and violence, was a constant, looming threat. The disapproval from Kale and Ranon solidified Nasha's resolve. He spent more time with Iline, learning all she knew about the prophecies surrounding the messenger's mark. She spoke of a time when the lines between peoples would blur, when understanding would be as vital as arrows or bullets. Shilan, she believed, was meant to be a part of that, a living bridge. But bridges, Nasha knew, were often walked upon by armies. He began to teach Shilan, in his own way. Though the child was barely old enough to focus his eyes for long, Nasha would point out the birds, the patterns of leaves, the way the light fell through the trees, murmuring their Apache names. He would sing soft, ancient songs, melodies his own mother had sung to him. Teaser, watching him one day, remarked, "You are more mother than scout now, Nasha." There was no mockery in her voice, only a quiet observation that held a surprising amount of respect. The external threat materialized sooner than he expected. A lone rider, an Apache from a larger, more militant band known to associate with renegades, stumbled upon their valley. He was scouting for new territory, his own group having been harried by soldiers. He saw Shilan, saw his pale skin, and his eyes narrowed with contempt. "You shelter a white whelp, old woman?" He sneered at Iline, ignoring Nasha for the moment. "Have you forgotten the blood they have spilled?" "This child carries the messenger's mark," Iline stated calmly, though her hand tightened on her walking stick. "He is one of us, in spirit." The renegade laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "A mark or a curse? He will bring the soldiers down on you. Give him to me. I will silence him before he causes more trouble." He reached for Shilan, who was sitting on a blanket near Nasha, examining a brightly colored feather. Nasha moved with the speed of a striking snake. His knife was at the renegade's throat before the man could blink. "Touch the child and you die." Nasha's voice was a deadly whisper. The camp fell silent, the tension electric. The renegade, whose name was Chaco, froze, his eyes wide with surprise and then anger. "You defend this thing? You, who scout for the bluecoats?" "I defend a child under my protection, a child of significance to my people, whether you see it or not." Nasha pressed the blade slightly, a single drop of blood welling on Chaco's skin. "Leave this valley, do not return, and speak of what you saw here to no one. If word of this child reaches the wrong ears because of you, I will find you." Chaco, though clearly furious, recognized the lethal intent in Nasha's eyes. He slowly raised his hands. "I will leave. But you are a fool, Nasha, you and this old woman. You cling to stories while our people die." With a final glare of hatred at Shilan, he backed away, mounted his horse, and rode out of the valley, his parting words a venomous promise: "This is not over." The encounter left the small band shaken. Kale and Rannon looked at Nasha with a newfound, grudging respect, but also with increased fear. Chaco's threat was real. If his band learned of a white child with a special Apache mark, they might see him as a valuable pawn, a bargaining chip, or simply an abomination to be eradicated. And if the army learned of an Apache band harboring a white child, their interpretation would be swift and brutal. Iline sighed, her ancient face etched with worry. "The time of decision is upon us, Nasha. This valley is no longer safe for Shilan, or perhaps for any of us if Chaco speaks." "Where can we go?" Nasha asked, the weight of the world seemingly on his shoulders. He looked down at Shilan, who had picked up his feather again, oblivious to the life-and-death drama that had just unfolded around him. A fierce, protective love, so potent it almost choked him, rose in Nasha's chest. He would not let anything happen to this child. "There is a place, Ili," Nay said slowly, "spoken of in the old legends, connected to the hawk spirit, a place of sanctuary, high in the spirit mountains. Few know the way. It is said only those with a true heart and a guiding spirit can find it. Perhaps it is time to seek it. It is a long and perilous journey, but Shilan's destiny may lie there, and ours in protecting him on that path." Nasha looked towards the distant, towering peaks of the Chiricahua Mountains, often called the Spirit Mountains by his people. It was a journey he had never contemplated. It would mean leaving behind everything he knew, the tenuous balance he had struck between two worlds, and fully embracing this new role, this sacred duty. It was a formidable risk, a leap into the unknown. But looking at Shilan's innocent face, at the hawk mark that bound their fates together, Nasha knew there was no other choice. His path was clear now, not as a scout for hire, but as a guardian, a protector, on a pilgrimage to safeguard a future he was only beginning to understand. "Then we prepare," Nasha said, his voice resolute. He would need all his skills, all his courage, for what lay ahead. He would face down any threat, Apache or white, to see Shilan safe. He was no longer just a man adrift. He was a man with a profound purpose, a purpose embodied in a small, hawk-marked child. The decision solidified a change within him, a shift from mere survival to dedicated protection, a public declaration of his commitment. The preparations for the journey to the Spirit Mountains were undertaken with a quiet urgency. Iline, despite her age, directed the efforts, her knowledge of ancient routes and survival techniques invaluable. Teaser helped prepare concentrated travel rations, dried meat pounded with berries and fat, parched corn, and ground nuts. The men, including a now more cooperative Kyle and Rannon, checked weapons and reinforced moccasins. Nasha focused on Sky, ensuring the pony was well fed and rested, and on Shilan, keeping the child calm and secure amidst the activity. He fashioned an even sturdier, more protective carrier for Shilan, lined with the softest rabbit fur, designed to shield the boy from the elements and the rigors of mountain travel. Their small group, Nasha, Shilan, Iline, Teaser with her own young son Kai, and the two hunters Kale and Rannon, set out under the cover of a moonless night. Leaving the hidden valley was a somber moment. It had been a sanctuary, however imperfect. Now they were venturing into the unknown, with enemies potentially on their trail and the harshness of the wilderness before them. Iline, riding a steady mule, led the way, her memory of the old trails surprisingly sharp. Nasha rode beside her, ever vigilant, Shilan strapped securely to his chest. Teaser and Kai, and the two hunters, followed. Their progress was slow, dictated by the need for stealth and the capabilities of the elderly woman and young children. Days turned into a week, then two. They traveled through shadowed canyons, across high mesas, and into the foothills of the great mountains. Nasha's scouting skills were tested daily. He found hidden water sources, identified edible plants, and guided them around areas where they might encounter patrols or hostile bands. Once they had to hide for an entire day in a dense thicket of manzanita as a large group of riders, possibly Chaco's band looking for them, passed nearby. Nasha held Shilan close, his hand over the baby's mouth to muffle any sound, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against the child's small body. The fear of discovery, the fear for Shilan's life, was a constant, gnawing presence. During this arduous journey, the bond between Nasha and Shilan deepened into something profound. The child, now several months old, had come to know Nasha as the center of his world. His cries were instantly soothed by Nasha's voice, his small hands would reach for Nasha's face, and his gurgles of contentment were reserved for moments when Nasha held him close, humming ancient Apache lullabies. For Nasha, Shilan was no longer a responsibility or a prophesied being. He was simply his son, in all but blood. The love he felt for the boy was fierce, unconditional, a guiding star in the darkness of their uncertain future. Iline, observing them, would often nod slowly, a wise smile playing on her lips. The spirit of the hawk chose well its guardian. She told him one evening as they camped by a small mountain stream, "You were a man lost between worlds, Nasha. This child has given you a world to belong to." As they climbed higher into the spirit mountains, the air grew thin and cold. The landscape became more rugged, the trails more treacherous. Kale and Rannon proved their worth, their strength and hunting skills vital to the group's survival. Tiza was a pillar of quiet resilience, caring for Kai and often helping with Shilan, her presence a comfort to Nasha. But it was Iline who held them together, her unwavering faith in their quest, her knowledge of the ancient ways, their guiding light. One day, after a particularly grueling climb, they reached a narrow pass, blocked by a massive rockfall. Despair threatened to engulf them. Kale voiced what many were thinking: "We cannot go on. The mountain has closed its door to us." Iline surveyed the obstacle, her gaze sweeping over the towering cliffs. "The mountain tests us," she said. "The path is never easy for those who seek sanctuary." She began to chant softly, an old song of passage, her eyes closed. Nasha, unwilling to give up, began to scout the area, looking for any alternative. Shilan, sensing the tension, began to whimper. Nasha rocked him gently. "Hush, little hawk," he murmured. "We will find a way." And then, as if in answer to Iline's song or Nasha's desperate hope, a section of the rockfall, loosened by recent rains perhaps, shifted and tumbled down the mountainside with a deafening roar, revealing a narrow, hidden trail behind it, barely wide enough for them to pass in single file. It was steep and dangerous, but it was a way through. "The spirits have shown us favor," Iline said, her voice filled with gratitude. "But we must hurry. Such signs are not given lightly." The final ascent was the most challenging. They faced biting winds, treacherous ice patches, and sheer drops. Nasha, carrying Shilan, moved with an almost superhuman focus and care, every step measured, every handhold tested. He felt the weight of not just the child, but the hopes of their small band, resting on his shoulders. Finally, as the sun began to set, casting long purple shadows across the peaks, they emerged onto a small hidden plateau. It was a place of breathtaking beauty and profound peace. Ancient pines clung to the rocky slopes, a clear stream gurgled nearby, and in the center of the plateau stood a circle of weathered stones reminiscent of a kiva, an ancient ceremonial site. The air was pure, the silence broken only by the sigh of the wind through the pines. This was the sanctuary Iline had spoken of, a place untouched by the turmoil of the world below. Iline sank to her knees, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "We have arrived," she whispered, "the place of the hawk's rest." Here, in this high, hidden sanctuary, they would make their stand. Not a stand of battle, but a stand for peace, for the future of a child who represented hope in a fractured world. Nasha looked at Shilan, asleep in his arms, his small face serene. The journey had been perilous, fraught with danger and doubt, but they had made it. His path, once so unclear, now stretched before him with a singular, profound clarity. He was Shilan's guardian, his father, and this sacred place would be their home. He would raise him here, teach him the ways of the Apache, the wisdom of the hawk, and perhaps, one day, Shilan would indeed become the bridge between worlds that the prophecies foretold. The immediate relief was palpable. The small group, exhausted but exhilarated, set about making the plateau habitable. The stone circle offered a natural focus, and they began constructing simple, sturdy shelters nearby, using fallen timber and stones, insulated with pine boughs and packed earth. Nasha, Kael, and Renon took on the heavier labor, while Tiza and Iline established a hearth and began to organize their meager supplies, their movements imbued with a sense of purpose and hope. Shilan, now a robust infant approaching his first year, thrived in the clean mountain air. He was crawling with surprising speed, exploring his new world with wide, curious blue eyes, the hawk mark on his shoulder a stark, beautiful contrast to his pale skin. Nasha rarely let the boy out of his sight, a quiet joy suffusing him as he watched Shilan's discoveries, a brightly colored beetle, the texture of moss, the way sunlight dappled through the pine needles. He carved small wooden animals for the boy, his knife, once a tool of survival and defense, now also an instrument of paternal affection. One evening, as the first stars pricked the darkening sky, Iline gathered them around the central fire. The flames danced, casting flickering shadows on their faces. "This place is sacred," she said, her voice resonating with ancient authority. "It is a refuge, given to us by the spirits. But its sanctity depends on us, on our harmony, on our commitment to the child who led us here." Her gaze rested on Shilan, who was curled asleep in Nasha's lap, one small hand clutching Nasha's finger. "Chaco knows we fled," Kael said, voicing the lingering unease. "He or others like him or even the soldiers might still search. They will not find this place easily," Nasha stated, his tone leaving no room for doubt. "The mountain protects its own, and we will be vigilant." He had already begun scouting the perimeter of the plateau, identifying defensible positions, escape routes, a lifetime of skill now dedicated to protecting this small, burgeoning community and its precious child. Iline then turned to Nasha directly. "The time has come, Nasha, for a formal naming, a ceremony to bind Shilan to this place, to our people in spirit, and to you, his chosen guardian." In the eyes of the Great Spirit, it was more than just a naming, it was an adoption, an affirmation of the bond that had grown between them, a public declaration within their small society that transcended blood. The ceremony was simple but deeply moving. It took place at sunrise within the circle of ancient stones. Iline, adorned in her most sacred regalia, chanted prayers to the four directions, to Mother Earth and Father Sky, and to the spirit of the hawk. Tiza had made a small buckskin tunic for Shilan, embroidered with a single blue hawk feather. Nasha, his heart full, held Shilan before the assembled group. "This child," Iline proclaimed, her voice clear and strong, "came to us as a sign. He carries the messenger's mark. He is Shilan, no Te, little hawk brother. And he is Nasha Yellin, Nasha's son." She placed a hand on Nasha's shoulder and another on Shilan's head. "May the spirits guide you both. May you walk in wisdom and courage. May this bond be a strength to our people." Nasha felt a profound sense of peace settle over him, a sense of belonging he hadn't realized he'd been missing his entire adult life. He looked down at Shilan, at the bright, trusting eyes looking up at him, and his path, once fraught with uncertainty and conflict, was now illuminated by a love that was as vast and enduring as the mountains surrounding them. He had been an Apache scout, a man between worlds. Now, he was a father, a guardian, a protector of a sacred trust. The world below might still rage with its conflicts and prejudices, but here, in the place of the hawk's rest, they had found their sanctuary, their purpose. The hawk birthmark, once a bewildering mystery, was now a symbol of hope, a testament to a connection that defied boundaries, a promise of a new beginning, not just for a child, but for a man who had found his true north in the heart of a baby. He watched Shilan reach for a ray of sunlight, his small fingers trying to catch the golden light, and Nasha knew with absolute certainty that this was where he was meant to be, his life forever changed, forever enriched. The immediate tension of pursuit had eased, replaced by the rhythms of establishing a hidden, sustainable life. Nasha, alongside Kael and Renon, became the primary hunters and protectors, their days spent tracking game in the high forests, securing the perimeter of their mountain sanctuary, and always listening for any sign of intrusion. Iline guided the spiritual life of their small community, teaching Tisa and even the men the old lore, the songs, the meanings held within the rustle of leaves and the cry of an eagle. Tisa, with young Kai toddling beside her, tended their small garden of hardy mountain vegetables and herbs, her quiet strength a bedrock for them all. Shilan was the bright, undeniable center of their existence. His laughter echoed among the pines, a sound of pure, uncomplicated joy. He learned to walk on the uneven ground of the plateau, his tumbles always met by Nasha's swift, gentle hands. Nasha taught him his first words, a mixture of Apache and the few English words he himself knew, watching with a father's pride as Shilan's understanding of the world expanded. The hawk mark on his shoulder seemed to grow more vivid as he grew, a constant reminder of his unique destiny. One crisp autumn afternoon, Nasha sat with Shilan near the edge of the plateau, overlooking the vast expanse of ridges and valleys stretching below, a tapestry of golds, reds, and browns. Shilan, now a sturdy toddler, pointed a chubby finger towards a distant soaring hawk. Nata, he lisped, his approximation of the Apache word for hawk. Nasha smiled, a deep, genuine smile that had become more frequent since their arrival in this sanctuary. Yes, little hawk, Nata. Strong and seeing far. He pulled the boy close, a familiar ache of love and protectiveness in his chest. The path had been unimaginably hard, filled with loss and fear, but it had led them here, to this moment of peace. The world below, with its wars and hatreds, felt a universe away, though Nasha knew it was always there, a shadow at the edge of their mountain haven. But here, they had built something true, something resilient. He thought of the renegade Chaco, of the soldiers he once scouted for, of the prejudices that had defined so much of his former life. They were still out there. But now, he had something more powerful to counter them, a community, a purpose, a son. The birthmark had indeed changed his path, not by leading him away from his Apache heritage, but by leading him deeper into its truest heart, towards responsibility, love, and the quiet courage of creating a sanctuary in a broken world. He held Shilan, feeling the boy's warm, solid presence against him, and knew that whatever the future held, whatever challenges might come, they would face them together. High in the place of the hawk's rest, this was their home, their life, a testament to a bond forged in hardship and sealed by a mark of prophecy. Nasha looks at the boy, now almost 3 winters old, chasing a butterfly near the ancient stone circle, his laughter echoing in the clear mountain air. Iline watches too, her eyes soft, from her seat by their sturdy wickiup. The mark on Shilan's shoulder, a dark hawk against his fair skin, is a familiar, cherished sight. Nasha's path was not just changed, it was remade, reforged in the fires of love and duty. He is no longer just a scout, but a leader, a father, a guardian of this small, improbable family, high in their mountain sanctuary. The future is unwritten, but here, under the watchful gaze of the Spirit Mountains, it feels hopeful. Thanks for watching. If you believe in compassion overcoming prejudice and finding love in unexpected places, give this story a like and subscribe for more. This story showed love and heroism where least expected. What was your favorite moment of connection between them? Tell us in the comments.